Hi, I'm Lionel, and welcome to another episode of the Threecolts podcast. Once again, we're joined by Ahmed Sandar, our resident expert when it comes to data and analytics. And today we'll be talking about how to help you understand those Valentine's Day sales and make sense of what sold, what didn't sell, and exactly what you should be doing looking forward to other Valentine's Day sales. So, Ahmed, can you give us some insights on these Valentine's Day trends?
Definitely. And thanks for the introduction, Lionel. Happy to be here for episode 4 and hope to continue providing some insights to our loyal customers. With regards to Valentine's Day, I think we identified three key points. The first is toys seem to dominate Valentine's Day searches. And this is actually kind of interesting because it sort of coincides with our seasonal sales report, in which we found that February was a big marketplace mover for toys. And I think in the case of like Valentine's Day, there's like lots of teddy bears, little stuffed animals, etc., for people trying to show affection to their significant others. And then also on the flip side, I think there's a lot of parents, etc., who may buy like similar sort of toys and stuff for their kids. So I think it's the confluence of those two. Second major observation we found is that cards, so like Valentine's Day cards, were the second biggest marketplace mover in terms of searches. And for this, it was pretty interesting because generally we don't think of cards like around seasonal holidays, etc., as being that significant. But in the case of Valentine's Day, at least for Amazon search trends, it was pretty high up there. And then the final thing we found out was a lot of the top searched products or top converting products were related to kids. And I think that's really interesting because obviously kids generally don't have as much disposable income, but there is a persistent effort to market that to parents or caregivers of children in that space. And so I think aligning your sales strategy to these three factors could be a good marketplace mover.
Toys wouldn't be the first place that I look to when I think of Valentine's Day, especially toys that would appeal to kids a lot more. Is it because we're seeing parents offer some toys to their kids? Why is this?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of twofold. I think there's that element of parents getting toys for their kids, but I think there's also the element of Valentine's Day sort of evokes the childish sort of sensibilities within us. And sometimes we might want to tap into that to sort of show affection. And so I think that's one of the major reasons why we see toys so high up that list. And I guess also the other factor is it's probably a lot easier to shop for toys online than things like chocolate, etc., because it's what you see is what you get, right? There isn't as much of a surprise or shock factor in that. So I'm guessing that the populace might also be more comfortable shopping for some of these Valentine's presents online.
That means then Valentine's Day is the only day of the year where it's safe to get an adult a teddy bear without seeming strange.
That or you're at the carnival.
Of course, of course. Well, if we can find a way to intersect Carnival and Valentine's Day, then that's double the profits for that person that figures that out.
Huge winning
So,
strategy.
so what insights can be drawn from these opportunities that we're finding within toys? Is it just toys, or are there things like apparel and beauty as well involved? I would expect that would be the case for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, so apparel and beauty also had some search interest, and then there was also stuff like jewelry. I think since the data set we were most focused on was the Amazon search trends. I think if you're on Amazon, I think people are more likely to buy things like toys versus things like personalized jewelry, etc. There's a lot more outlets for like more bespoke designs, etc. in that space. Whereas with toys, it's generally you're buying something off the shelf, and given that Amazon is like the world's largest marketplace, now on Amazon you have the widest selection probably possible. But things like health and beauty, we did see some health and beauty bundles, sort of like makeup packages, etc. So that's also definitely an area of interest, but it wasn't as significant as I would have thought. And that was actually pretty interesting to me in going through the data.
I mean, that kind of makes sense because the last thing a guy wants to do is make a mistake of buying a makeup set for your girlfriend, for your wife that isn't going to work for them. So you just go for the safe option of a toy. And perhaps, I know I recently just bought house robes, Mr. and Mrs. house robes. That's a
Nice.
safe bet. It's a safe
Embroidered.
bet.
Yeah.
But then going back to appealing to children, how does things like children themed products, school themed products still fit into February?
Yeah, and this was pretty interesting because looking through sort of like the search interests, some of the items we saw were like classroom decorations or like packets for kids to like write like notes, etc. on Valentine's Day. And I know just in like discussions with some of my colleagues on like this side of the pond here in the USA, somewhat interesting because a lot of school districts don't necessarily have as much disposable income. So I guess I think the strategy for a lot of sellers is have this appeal to the parents of kids in these schools, and then they can sort of purchase those products. And then I'm guessing kids also love to share, right? Or some kids love to share. I know my nephew is a little pulley, um, but I think there's a general trend of spreading affection, love, and caring about others for Valentine's Day. And so I think what we saw was that a lot of the bundles were related to kids and somewhat classroom settings.
You wouldn't think that Valentine's Day would be a family orientated thing where you can market to every single member of the family, not just the adults and the parents.
Yeah, and you do bring up a good point. That it's not necessarily conventional wisdom that you can market to the entire family, but and you mentioning that just made me think if I am a parent with some young ones, right, and I'm getting chocolate, I know my kids are going to want to eat that chocolate, so probably in my best interest to also get them something. So I think sellers can also think about bundling in that manner, like what works for like families, because that's probably a decent segment of the interested population as well. And we actually had a section in our report about bundling, and it was pretty interesting because it's probably split where there are some products that do better bundled and others that don't. So, for example, looking at this chart here, it's like weirdly something like shoes did better in bundle, and I'm guessing that was more along the lines of like Valentine's Day slippers or something like that, right? So you're probably not going to buy like a single. You probably want something for you and your partner. So that bundle sort of makes sense. And then we also saw improved conversion rates on items like cards. Because obviously, like I mentioned, there was like the classroom aspect. So there was like a lot of like 24-piece Valentine's cards, etc. And we saw that those had higher conversion rates. Similarly, we saw slightly higher conversion rates in beauty and jewelry, home improvement, like pet products. Pet products was also another surprising one. Um, the conversion rate was on average about 1.47% higher than unbundled. So I'm guessing that's also catered towards situations in which individuals or um, couples have more than one pet, right? In which case, then you can take advantage of that by selling bundled products.
Again, I'm a social media guy, so I'm always going to revert back to how much social media is influencing our purchasing habits. People aren't just purchasing to make their partners happy now. They're purchasing for the purpose of, can you post this online? And you're right, you can only post a box of chocolates online so many times. You want to have a toy, you want to buy something for your dog that you can post online, get a few likes, something for your children. We know children content on social media is always going to trend. So it, it makes sense how some of these trends online influence the purchases that we make. And just think, I guess for sellers, it could be just think, can the person buying this post this online during Valentine's Day? Can they make their followers jealous? If not, you may want to pivot.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely an angle that sellers should have to consider. Like you mentioned, social media marketing, social media virality is a huge factor in e-commerce marketing today. And for that reason, it's imperative that you're able to capture the zeitgeist moment when it does happen, right? And you don't want to be the one left catching up to those moments. You want to be well positioned to um, be able to sell those products that catch that fire.
And going back to one of my favorite reports that you've done that's influenced the way that I do things, writing winning titles online. In that report, you mentioned using sentiment to attract buyers, but you also mentioned keywords. What kind of keywords are you finding coming up for Valentine's Day?
Yeah, so specifically for this analysis, we looked at keywords in specifically the card category. I was thinking that that was probably where the keywords would probably be most effective. If you're shopping for a Valentine's Day card, you want, I don't know, maybe some aspect of like your pet name for your significant other, or something of the like. And yeah, we found some of the top converting keywords for cards were bright, turtle, buttons, um, KC, Kansas, bike, motor bicycle. um, and I think like what we saw was some of the top converting keywords had to do with like themes or items. So, like for example, turtle is a high converting keyword, so I'm guessing that's for like the cuteness factor of like turtles, or maybe like if you're buying your Valentine some turtle stuffed toy, you probably want like a turtle themed card related to it. And then also, since we were looking at the 2023 search results, what was interesting was we saw KC in Kansas, and Valentine's Day happens pretty close to the Super Bowl. So last year, Kansas City were in the Super Bowl, and this year they are as well. And fortunately, Kansas City's primary color is red. So I'm guessing that there's a lot of football fans also sort of angling and using sort of their love for football and intertwining that with Valentine's Day. So it's an interesting sort of like mesh of ideas. And I think other things that we saw were some of the other top converting keywords were like adventure and like Octonauts, which is a pretty popular kids show. So I think for sellers, it's understanding what is selling in the kids space and making sure that you have items that capture that content. So I think like now some of the top kids shows are like Bluey, um, uh, Bluey, I Am Groot, We Baby Bears, content around some of those like top watched kids shows can also be a good avenue for sellers.
When you mentioned turtles being one of the top converting keywords, that really threw me off. But then I remembered awkward turtle, that trend from about a decade ago. But it's still something that I guess it's a fun way to be playful with your partner and make fun of them without it being too serious. So it's interesting to see all the little things that pick up when it comes to these trends, and it gives sellers something to look forward to or something to latch onto for next year's sales as well.
It's sort of interesting when we look through some of the trends, and like there's the conventional wisdom versus what the data shows, and sometimes it doesn't always line up. But then you think about it a little more and you're like, oh yeah, this was a trend that started maybe like 5-ish years ago, and it's still sort of like in people's sort of like in people's minds, right? So I think it's always interesting to the assess the data with a critical lens, and think about what's happened in the past and what's happening today and how those trends are going to affect people's purchasing decisions in the future.
So, speaking of purchasing decisions, how does pricing strategy impact the number of sales that people are going to be able to get when it comes to Valentine's Day?
I think what we found was a lot of the top selling products that we assessed were in the more affordable range. So we were looking at U.S. data, so it was about $50 and less. I think some of the more expensive items were probably like jewelry, which wasn't as highly searched, possibly because it's more expensive. And I think on average, the jewelry prices were in like the $80 to $120 range. So I think what we found was people are looking for affordable, cute, and thoughtful options for their partners. Ideally, if it's like in that $50 and under price range, I think you stand a chance of doing better. But then there's also the bundling angle, and what we also found was a lot of the bundles, like chocolate, if the be it chocolate, cards, etc., will also in that $50 and under price range. So um, I think what we found was a lot of shoppers on Amazon are value shoppers, right? They are looking for the best value for their dollar. They're not going to Amazon to buy the most bespoke product. They're going to Amazon to find something that's convenient, affordable, and still of premium quality, right? They want the holy trifecta. And and I think it's up to sellers to use titles, right? You optimize your titles to be able to present that premium quality product. And then you also want to ensure that the product you're selling is of decent quality and satisfies the needs of your customers.
So, were there any surprises that you found in the trends of Valentine's Day in 2024?
Yeah, I think one thing that was kind of surprising to me was like chocolate was not as high on the search rankings as I would have thought. And initially I thought that was really strange. And then I started thinking about it a little more. And I'm just like, probably around Valentine's Day, you probably want something a little more artisanal. Like artisanal chocolate sets. I know, for example, like now in the US, like local like mom and pop stores for things like this are in vogue. And so I think it started making more sense to me when I applied that lens to it. Um, but yeah, chocolate was, I think it was still in the top 10, but it wasn't in the top five. I believe it was ranked about seventh or eighth in terms of like search term volume and frequency.
Did you expect chocolate to be number one?
I definitely thought it would be in at least the top three.
Well, this goes back to what we've been told to look out for and what the data versus what the data actually says. And we imagine that it would be chocolate and flowers, but really it's toys and teddy bears and things like that, and things that relate to kids. I guess you're also looking at things that are, people are also more likely to trust non perishables or things that aren't just going to, yeah, expire.
Exactly. And like I know, speaking to like some sellers, some of the challenges in moving chocolate, right? And I think when we think of the United States, I think a lot of times I think we think of like the northern states only, but then we also forget that there's a bunch of southern states in which temperatures are pretty high, right? It's pretty hot. And so if you're ordering chocolate on Amazon, there's a possibility that that could melt. And I'm guessing for like Valentine's Day, you're likely getting things like bonbons and stuff with all the designs, and you want those to persist. So there's probably a decent amount of the trust element in that. And similarly with flowers, I think generally with flowers, people want to like see, smell, feel the flowers before they make that purchase because a it's kind of expensive, and also you want to make sure that it fits the aesthetic you're trying to present. And sometimes that's missed in the like images, or like when you get it, you know, there's a broken twig here, etc. And then you have to become a florist all of a sudden, and then it becomes a little bit challenging for you.
So then, based on your analysis, looking at all the data that you've pulled together, what are some of your recommendations for how sellers can maximize their sales and optimize everything for Valentine's Day?
Yeah, so thanks for that. I think putting everything together, one thing I guess we didn't necessarily mention was in terms of when the searches peaked. So we found that in general, Valentine's Day searches peaked the week of Valentine's Day, but there was a significant increase also the week prior. So I think for sellers, you probably want to position your promotion campaigns about 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. That's or at least you have the peak of your promotion campaign about 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. You can start earlier and get that early interest, but 2 weeks before is probably a safe bet. Second, I think you want to ensure that you have a decent inventory of toys that appeal to Valentine's partners, kids that may be celebrating Valentine's days, like classroom setting, etc. I think if you're into like card stock, if you're like a card stock manufacturer, etc., I think looking into what are some of the trends going on this year, what should I print on cards, is also a good thing to consider. You look at sort of like the cultural landscape and like what's in the zeitgeist, what's cute, what's cool. If you're able to put that on cards, I think that's a big opportunity for you as well. And on the seller side of the card front, I think getting a wide variety of cards that have lots of positive sentiment keywords and cute keywords, and then also similar to the cardstock manufacturers, I'm thinking about what are things that generally evoke positive emotions on cards and ensuring that you have a wide variety of that in stock as well. And I think the final thing is you should be targeting parents with kids or parent parents with kids in educational settings also. And I think what we found was there was a large volume of interest from that segment, and being able to fulfill the demand for that segment would be really helpful.
I can only imagine how useful this is going to be for sellers, and we definitely look forward to having you on again and talking about your next article. Can you give us an insight into what your next report is going to be?
Next article is going to be focused on Easter. So we're going to be looking at Easter search trends. We're going to be looking into our data, seeing what items sold in and around Easter, and we're also going to be trying to add a couple more layers to this analysis. I think this Valentine's Day piece was sort of the basis of what we're working on, and we want to be able to add a lot more tactical information for sellers to be able to use as a guide.
And if people want to drop any questions about what you're going to be writing about or put in a point that they would like to see, what's the best place for them to contact you?
I think best place to contact me would be on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Ahmed Ahmed, last name Sanda Sanda. And if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to start a conversation and get involved with your organization, your business, and hopefully partner to supercharge your success on Amazon.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Thank you for joining us and look forward to catching you on the next one.